Hello and welcome to polyplane.com. A couple of weeks ago I talked about the technical drawing mode, and what this does is it creates sort of silhouette of whatever your object is with just a outer perimeter and the edges highlighted, so there's sort of a graphic look to it. And I had mentioned that I wanted to kind of go over in the next couple of weeks the Make2D command specific to Rhino, but a lot of other software packages can do this more on the engineering and drafting side, so like AutoCAD and SolidWorks can do this as well. The reason it's so cool is because you can get a little bit more control with your curve. So I'm just going to switch this back over to shaded for a second so you can kind of see the form. So this is just a shoe that I roughed out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything and I'm going to go up to dimension and go to make 2D drawing, and this pop-up is going to come up and you have some selections here: current view, current C-plane, 4-view USA, 4-view Europe. 4-view USA is kind of neat because if you're going to be doing any dimensioning, it's a really good way to put everything into your top, front, right, and perspective view, and then you can actually pull dimensions off of that. But what I want is actually the current view. We're not going to show any hidden lines or tangent edges or anything, and I'm just going to click OK. And it's going to think for a minute, and then it's going to produce a line drawing. So if I go to my top view here, you may think, okay, well, this is great. It's a line drawing, but why not just use the technical line drawing mode instead? Well, the thing of it is I can come back in here now and select these vectors. Actually, I'm going to trim that, and I can actually kind of edit the line drawing and give it just a little more finesse and get something a little bit more specific to what I want as far as a line drawing goes. So what the Make2D drawing does is essentially gives you much better control over your final drawing. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of fragmented pieces, and these edges are all defined by the curves on your original object. So that's why there's all these little artifacts, is because the curves that made the original object were highly segmented. So it's going to result with a lot more artifacting here. If I had just done a cube, it would give me a much cleaner result because a cube's not that complicated. As a matter of fact, I'll show you what a cube looks like before I take these into Illustrator, so you can kind of get an idea of what I mean. The shortcut is Alt D2 in Rhino for this. Current view. Current view just means whatever your active viewport is, whatever's in that window, that's what it's going to draw. I'm just going to delete the cube so you can get an idea here. So because there were 6 outer perimeter edges, kind of like what you would see in the technical line drawing, that's what it drew. Now you'll also notice that these curves aren't joined. That's because they're all independent edges. So if I join those, I can actually make them one line. And you want to do this too, especially if you're going to bring these line drawings into Illustrator, because otherwise you're going to be left with a whole bunch of like incomplete curves. Like you can see in this shoe illustration, there's lots of segments that come together to make the form. So that's why I kind of come back into the drawing after it's been produced and just kind of clean it up a little. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I might do just a couple more and just kind of join stuff as I'm going along here. Might trim that one back. So one curve, and then you want to kind of come back here and just connect all the, after the line drawing's produced, connect all the lines together and just kind of go around the perimeter, making sure that there's no stray curves. And if there is, just delete them. Now this doesn't have to be perfect, because Illustrator's a little bit better with hiding mistakes as far as multiple curves being joined all at one point, so you can kind of make some errors here and there and it's not going to be the end of the world. But what we want to do is essentially just clean up that line as much as we can, join everything together as much as we can, and then call it done. So we're going to take our cube and our shoe form here and just file, export selected, and then save this as an Illustrator file. Click save, and when you're in your Illustrator export options, you could preserve the scale, but because this thing is so big, we're just going to do a snapshot of the current view, and then click OK. So we're going to hop back into Illustrator here and open it back up. So once it's in here, we can do everything we could do in Illustrator. If you don't have Illustrator, you can use Corel Draw or Inkscape or any of those other vector-based illustration softwares. Here's why I did all that work to kind of join all the curves together. You can see they're all connected here in Illustrator. Now it's true, I could have done this in Illustrator, but I felt it's a little more painstaking to do in here versus doing it in the 3D software. So we're going to use the cube just as a quick demo, and then I'll go ahead and flesh out the shoe. But essentially you want to take the outer boundary, and you can apply any of the looks that you normally would, as I showed in the technical drawing mode, where you have like an outer boundary and then your inner strokes are a little bit thinner. Maybe you got a detail line there. And what's so cool about this is it gives you so much more control over what you're drawing, and can really create some really interesting illustration styles now. So I can take any of this stuff and copy it into like Photoshop as a path or as pixels or whatever, and it'll maintain all my stroke widths that I had. Now I just copied it as pixels. I could have copied it as a path and then use that as an illustration mask or whatever. But the point is, using the Make2D command can actually really save you a lot of time in the long run, even though it's a little more process driven. So if you're doing any sort of illustration work and you've decided to pick up 3D as sort of, secondary or tertiary skill set, and you want to bring some of your 3D stuff out into your illustration space, this is actually a really great tool to do that. Because of the fact that it's vectors, you can control it and scale it, and it doesn't have any sort of quality degradation. So that's the Make2D command. And if you want, like I said before too, you can also use this to create orthographic drawings for pulling dimensions. It's going to take a little bit longer, obviously, because there's more information. It's got to draw, top, front, right, and perspective drawing. So, and when it's done, it'll draw all your views that you have set up here. And you kind of have to go through the same thing, deleting your creases and everything. But then you can export this out to Illustrator or whatever vector-based software, or Photoshop or whatever. But you can then pull points off of this, and this is a great way to kind of rough out your dimensions. One other thing that's worth pointing out too is that when you draw out a Make2D sort of command, it's going to create a layer called Make2D visible lines. And so that way it's kind of easy to keep track of, because you can just turn it on and off and everything's grouped together. And then within the group, you can select your curves as normal. So that's just one more quick tip with that. So anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching, and have a great day. See you next week.